All right. Welcome, everybody. This is nice. Aren't you guys so timely? I mean, maybe somebody else will sneak in here still, but we've got a couple of seats for them. Absolutely appreciate you coming today for this presentation. This is a topic that needs more discussion, and it's something that I know today we're going to be able to get to information that most likely you've never heard before, because there's been a pretty standard approach to mental health challenges for the past several decades at this point, and unfortunately what we're ending up with is more and more mental health challenges. We need to think about it in a different way. We need to think about it in a bigger way. So we're going to work on that today. We're going to do some expansion with things. I also know that mental health is a thing that has a wide spectrum, of course. Lots of things fall under the umbrella of mental health and mental health challenges. So I acknowledge that each of you are probably at a different spot on that spectrum. And, however we can be of support to you, that's what we want to do. So today is going to be around an hour. That's my goal. Raven.
Does he tend to go over?
I do. I tend to get excited about what I'm talking about, and we go for it. But there's also a lot of research that I'm going to be presenting that I don't need to turn you into researchers with. I'll hit the high points and move on. That's my goal, because there is a real solid objective that I want you to get from it, and that's the idea that there is a different way to approach healthcare. There is a different way to approach care for mental health as well. So, yes, did everybody get the sign-in iPad? Is that the final one? Okay, great. We're all set then. Okay, great. So as we get rolling, I'm just going to move this thing back, or I'll trip on it. Let's get to know me a little bit more. I think I know one of you in the room, so welcome everybody else. I am Dr. Chris Grier. This is my assistant, Raven. Raven's been with us for the past year, does a fantastic job as our new patient concierge, we call her. So she's the one that gets to work with people right off the bat. She also does a lot of the work for us in our examination room, utilizing the technology that we have. So Raven's here to help tonight if you have any questions. And of course, as we go through things, typically when I do presentations, my goal is for people to be able to walk away with more knowledge, with more ability to take action themselves. That's the goal. And sometimes that action is, man, I'm really interested to get checked by a chiropractor. So I'm a chiropractor, and I have chiropractic colleagues around, even a couple others in Eastern Iowa who do a really nice job. So if you're inspired to get checked, which we'll have a lot more information about what even that means today, we'll have an opportunity for that at the end, and Raven can help with that. So I am a family and pediatric chiropractor. I saw somebody checking out our Chiro Kids Club. That's our growing wall of all the kids that we take care of. I started this practice along with my wife in 2007, and right off the bat, I actually came out of school as a certified chiropractic pediatric practitioner, and we've seen kids and pregnant women every week, probably every day of our practice since 2007. So I love doing that. I was also a high school teacher before I did this, and one of the things that I started seeing back in the early 2000s was this increasing challenge with mental health. I think that's been ramped up significantly in the last 10 or 11 years. Looks like we might have another educator in the room. All right, there we go. So you've probably seen some of the decline of that. Yes. Well, first off, thank you very much. And I didn't get out of it because I didn't like it. I actually got out of it because I was called to this profession for sure. So I still love educating, which is why I do this sort of thing. But one of the things that I know teachers that I talk with and care for are saying is that the mental health challenge is becoming a bigger and bigger deal for kids. So we'll see some information about that shortly. What we do here is we focus on the nervous system, chronic health challenges, and health performance. So you'll learn a lot about the nervous system today, and what most people don't appreciate about healthcare in general is that there's this entire group of health professionals who are for health performance, not just taking care of things that are already wrong, but how can we make things even better, which I'll allude to in a second. And I am an active member of the Iowa Chiropractic Society, the International Chiropractors Association, and the International Pediatric Chiropractic Association, which is where I got my training from in the pediatric realm of things. And then I'm also a professional chiropractic coach. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays and on some weekends, I coach other chiropractors on how to better deliver service in their community and to their people. So for instance, I did a 4-hour workshop in St. Paul, Minnesota this Saturday, which was a ton of fun, to 31 other chiropractors and their assistants there. So that's the sort of thing that I do. And what's that?
I said, I think you might be the first Iowa chiropractor I've ever met that's not gone to Palmer.
Yeah, true.
Literally every single one.
Yes, most Iowa chiropractors go to Palmer. I didn't. So my pediatric training is through the ICPA, the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, and my formal chiropractic training was up in Minnesota at Northwestern Health Sciences University. I take an approach to health that is called in the profession, and actually in the not just the chiropractic profession, but in science in general, an approach called salutogenesis. If you break that word down, genesis means the origin of, and salu is health in Latin and also in French. So what salutogenesis is it's an approach focusing on factors that support human health and well-being rather than on symptoms of disease. So we say, what can we do to revive the wilting plant instead of, oh my goodness, how can we paint the leaves green again? What can we do to actually improve the health of the human we're working with instead of working to cover up and mitigate the symptoms that they're having? In the process of a human becoming healthier, typically the symptoms go away too. That's the great part about the approach that we take. All right, so I want you to meet Sam. Actually, I want you to first meet her spine. In fact, the spine in her neck. So this is what I saw with Sam the first time I looked. And you're probably going like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm going to orient you in just a minute. But to give you background, Sam was at the time, a 14-year-old girl who had onset of anxiety and social disorders. Her parents brought her in for that to a chiropractor. Wow, that's an unusual thing for a parent to do, because who knows that chiropractors can work on that sort of thing. It can help with that sort of thing. Not very many parents, so I was glad for that. Let me orient you to what that spine ought to look like. So the cervical spine in black and white, so this is the neck. This is a person looking in this direction. That's the base of the skull, that's the jaw right there, and these are the vertebrae in the neck. When they're aligned in this beautiful arc like that, that allows for these discs or the spacers between to not have any pressure on them, and the spinal cord and the brain stem to hang slack in there so that there's no stress on those structures. That arc is what we in chiropractic call the arc of life. We want to have that really strong curve there so it supports us in gravity without creating more stress on the spinal cord and the brain stem. That's what that's supposed to look like. Now, as I showed before, that's what Sam's looked like when she first came into me. We're going to be talking about the spinal cord, the brainstem, the brain quite a bit today as we have our discussion about mental health. And I'm going to show you what happened with Sam as we get to the end of the presentation today. I'm going to be talking about a lot of research, like I said. Don't worry, please don't try to jot down all of the references and that sort of thing. I know I'm also a learner. I love the input of more knowledge too. I'm the one who's always trying to write down, I got to look up that study, that sort of thing. Because you're signed in here today, you're going to be on a mailing list where you're going to get information in the next 2 weeks that will include the resources that we go over today. So never fear, that stuff is on its way to your inbox. So we're going to cover it in this order. What's going on? Why is that going on? And what's next? The impact of mental health in our country is tremendous. In fact, 15 million adults, which is about 6.7% of Americans 18 and older, have a mental health disorder. It is the leading cause of disability in the United States for ages 15 to 44. 25%-ish of U.S. adults have a mental illness. 50% of U.S. adults will develop at least one mental illness during their lifetime. It is more prevalent in women than in men, and rates for both intentional and unintentional injuries are 2 to 6 times higher among people with mental illness. It's a $300 billion per year economic impact, and that's a significant burden, but I say that it pales in comparison to the burden that the individuals and their circle are encountered with because of that. This was a surprise to me as I was prepping for this, that mental disorders are actually the most costly disorders of all the health disorders in our society. And it's pretty significant. As you can see here, military is a large part of that. So I have a distinct spot in my heart for those who have served the country, and I think we all need to know that they have taken a large burden for us, and unfortunately they're not being cared for to the level that they need to, and that really shows up in that graphic there. So lots and lots of expenditure, therefore lots and lots of prevalence of these disorders happening. Anxiety alone, it's the most common mental illness, commonly diagnosed mental illness in the United States. It's 40 million adults. Anxiety alone is 18% of the population, and anxiety covers $42 billion a year of that cost. Nearly 50% of those diagnosed with depression are also diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So anxiety and depression, as many people know, are intimately linked. Unfortunately, there's also 9 million children with an anxiety disorder. That's 1 in 8 children have an anxiety disorder. I can tell you that was not the case 50 years ago. And it is not because it wasn't being diagnosed. That's oftentimes what gets thrown out. Oh, it's just more diagnosis, earlier detection nowadays. There may be some of that, but it's not that. There is something new going on. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, affects 7.7 million adults. Women, again, are more likely to be affected than men. And interestingly, 67% of people exposed to mass violence have been shown to develop PTSD, which is a higher rate than those exposed to natural disasters and other types of traumatic events, hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and all of that sort of thing. When it's actual assault that people are witnessing from other human beings, 67% of those folks are shown to develop PTSD. There's also OCD. This one, I do think, could be more prevalent than what we even know as well. And 2.2 million adults. This one's equally common amongst men and women. 19 is the median age of onset. Median is the mathematical thing for that's the point at which half of the people are diagnosed before that and half of the people are after that. Math teacher can reinform me if I got my median and my mean wrong, but I don't think I did. And a third of affected adults first experience symptoms in childhood. So OCD is a significant issue. It's now thought to affect as many as 2 to 3% of children, which is over 2 million children in the United States. The World Health Organization identifies mental health disorders as the #2 cause of disability in the Western world. They account for 13% of the global disease burden. This is 2001. In 2001, the WHO said by 2020, depression will be the second leading cause of world disability. And in 2008, they said that by 2030, depression is expected to be the largest contributor to the disease burden. Those numbers have become true, as we saw in the data earlier. Unfortunately, then 2020 showed up and everybody got isolated, which was a major hit to mental health in all people, but my goodness, it absolutely was a huge thing for children in our culture. At this moment, there are more people now being treated than ever before, and we need to start asking the question, if the treatments worked, shouldn't there be less mental illness? Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing. So I always say, if you're heading in one direction towards a goal and you find out that you're actually not approaching that goal, in fact, maybe you're getting farther away from that goal, I think it's time to change course. Right? We have to do things differently. And again, I completely acknowledge that many times when people show up to a discussion like this, there have been a lot of things explored, a lot of things tried. So I'm not out there saying anything disparaging about any of the treatments or the therapies that have been approached or taken by people. But what I am saying is today we get to learn in different ways about mental health and what can be done. 1 in 33 children and 1 in 8 adolescents are dealing with mental health disorders, and 43% or 32 million children have at least one of 20 chronic health conditions.
Chris, I'm clarifying based on the number you're showing.
Yep.
And I don't know the definition of this. Are you classifying ADHD as a mental health disorder? In this research? Do you know? So it does tend to get grouped into there. I don't believe in my data ADHD is actually in that, because then it is an even higher Because I was
number.
looking at your numbers and I'm like, these seem conservative.
Right, they seem low.
You didn't mention it, so
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yep, thank you. So that, again, ADD, ADHD, that's something that...
Some people do, some people don't.
Right. So not for our numbers tonight. But we might get to talk about it. So that'd be good. Okay, this is interesting because lots of times, particularly with depression, serotonin is thrown out there as the problem, that there's an issue in the brain with serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, and the brain doesn't have enough levels of serotonin. Well, when researchers actually look at this, such as this medical doctor from Ben Gurion University, who also studied at Harvard and Duke and worked with the National Institute of Mental Health, he points out that numerous studies of norepinephrine and serotonin metabolites in plasma, urine, and cerebrospinal fluid, so measuring the blood, measuring the urine, measuring the actual brain fluids, as well as post-mortem studies of the brain of patients with depression, have yet to identify the deficiency reliably. The deficiency of serotonin is what they're talking about. This book says that although it's often stated with great confidence that depressed people have a serotonin or norepinephrine deficiency, the evidence actually contradicts these claims. So there isn't that scientific evidence for it. We go on that this guy, I won't read all of that, but he never saw any convincing evidence from that any psychiatric disorder, including depression, results from a deficiency of brain serotonin, and that physicians who tell their patients that their depression and anxiety result from a chemical imbalance in the brain are confusing theories with facts. He says that there isn't actually a way to test for this, so it's theoretical, and I'm not against theories, by the way. I think theories oftentimes have some support, but they're saying there might be something different going on that's not serotonin related. We'll talk about why the drugs aimed at serotonin, which are SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, why they do tend to have a symptomatic improvement on things. Yeah, no problem. Do you need some water? Okay. Got it. So my slide is like All right, so after all that, are you depressed yet? Like, oh my gosh, is the sky is falling, or it has fallen, and what can we do about it? Well, there are things we can do about it, but there's tough questions to ask. First off is, why do mental health conditions occur with other physical conditions? Second, why are they strongly predicted by early life stress? Third, what if mental health issues are not a disease, but rather more of a symptom, which we'll tease out the differences between those things. And four, what if mental health conditions are a whole body, systemic problem, and not something that, as they say, is all in your head or just between your ears, you know?
I think it makes sense that it would be all of it.
Absolutely.
I have a daughter with mental health diagnosis, and I feel like for her, it is all kinds of seems to go together.
Yep.
In my opinion.
For sure. And we'll talk quite a bit about that. Last month I did a workshop called Gut-Brain Disorder, and it's very clear, and we'll talk about some of that connection with the gut and the brain today as well. But it is an all-encompassing thing, so if we think we can know it by narrowing it down to brain only, particularly brain neurotransmitters only, we are missing a ton of opportunity there. And I think it's probably the reason why we're not having very much success in getting on top of this problem. All right, so let's go to some theory of our own, some conceptual things. So you've got a car. What does a car need, and what do they need to work? Any mechanical system. Well, it needs the right parts, and it needs power, and it needs information. Okay? In a car, for instance, we all know the parts. There's a couple 10,000 parts to a car that all have to work in conjunction. Pretty amazing engineering, right? Well, keep in mind that you're made of several trillion cells all working together. That's pretty good. And it all has to be coordinated in some way. In the car, though, those parts also need power. Typically, still, that's driven by some sort of internal combustion engine that then creates power for an electrical system that creates the information that tells the transmission when to shift. It tells, there's all these oxygen balance things and how the combustion works, all of that. But the information is the thing that allows it to run. If we didn't have the information, it wouldn't run. Of course, if we didn't have the power or the parts, it wouldn't run. You need it all. Same thing with a computer system, right? It needs parts, it needs power, it needs information. What do you think about a living system? What three things do you think it needs? All those things. You got it. It needs parts, power, and information. Oftentimes we, as Western science, try to break things down. We get very mechanistic with the human body, and we break it down into all of its organ systems, and then all of the organs within those organ systems, and then we have specialists who are just working with the kidney or the heart or the lungs or whatever. And man, they're very highly trained folks, but in the end, they're unfortunately not making very many people healthy. Like, if the goal of healthcare is health, we're just not doing very well with that at all. We need to acknowledge the fact that all of those things matter and work together. We absolutely need all of our parts working together. We need to give it the appropriate power, the fuel that it needs. And then the information in a vertebrate system like we are is the nervous system. It's the brain, it's the spinal cord, it's all the nerves that go out to serve every cell, every tissue, or every organ of the body. That information is what needs to happen, or what needs to be passing through that nervous system in order for us to function efficiently. We'll carry on. So, because systems are made of parts, they are all designed to eventually, what do you think? Wear out, die, break down, right? They're gonna break down. It's the reality of it. In chiropractic, we function on a set of 33 principles, one of which is the fact that there are limitations to matter. The human being has limitations to its matter, to the stuff we're made out of. the information is always optimal, is always perfect. How it gets transferred through the matter can be problematic. Does that make sense? So that's as simple, to me, as chiropractic philosophy gets. If we can keep the information flowing freely, then the body has an excellent opportunity to heal if we give it the rest of its environment set up appropriately. So if we have a living system like this plant here, which is quite beautiful, by the way. Kim, our other assistant, does a very nice job keeping us in beautiful plants here. And that thing was wilting, right? If it's starting to droop, if it's getting brown, that sort of thing. Help me out. How do I fix it? Rochelle, you can't answer this because we just talked about this yesterday.
Download the app that takes a picture of the leaves and tell you what's wrong with it.
There we go. And then that app is going to tell you to do what?
Water it or not water it, or move it or repot it.
Yes, exactly. Water it or not water it, right? Thank you for adding both of those, because almost everybody says, well, water it. Oh man, I've killed a lot of plants by overwatering them. I don't know about you guys. Well, I want to get better. Keep watering it. Oh, whoops, it didn't need that much water. You have to give it the appropriate amount of water. Why would you move it?
Sunlight?
Yep, you got to get the appropriate amount of sunlight to it, right? And then nutrients, which may be why you repot it, right? Or you can leave it in the same pot perhaps, but it just needs a jolt of fertilizer or whatnot. Let's say we get it nailed for this species of plant, and this particular plant's not past its ability to heal. We haven't left it that way. It's not like it sat there for months, dead, dry, it's past its limitations. Let's say it has the ability to heal. We get all of that right for this particular species of plant. What's going to happen to the plant?
It should improve.
Yeah, it is going to. In fact, it has no option. It's not thinking about it. It's not like, oh, maybe I want to improve, maybe I don't want to improve. It is designed to be healthy. It's designed to express health when it's given the right set of circumstances. So that's a plant. Human beings are no different. I mean, we're very different than plants, but we're no different than the generalization there for living systems, in that when we give the organism exactly what it needs, then it is set up for thriving. So what happens though if you take away or disturb the parts, the power, or the information of a human being? The clear answer is it's not going to function as well, right? Anywhere on the spectrum of not functioning as well. Like if this is optimal function and this is dead, like maybe it's here, right? And nobody ever notices. Or maybe it's here and it's like, whoa, things aren't very good. Or maybe it's here and it's like, oh my goodness, this is really, really bad. Lots of times though, it's way over here, and for a long period of time, we don't even notice. We've just reset our baseline, or it's not even something that's notable yet. That's exactly what happens. All right, come on now. So when symptoms show up, we acknowledge as chiropractors that those symptoms are the perfect expression of our parts, power, and our information. So symptoms are not a bad thing. Symptoms are the effect of a cause. So if all we do is eliminate a symptom thinking that it's a bad thing, but we haven't addressed the cause, have we corrected the problem? No. And this is where we depart significantly from most of the rest of the medical world, which is where we're saying, okay, your symptoms have wisdom. Your symptoms are telling you things. Your symptoms are there for a reason. We need to be grateful for your symptoms. So let's lean in and figure out why they're there so that we can correct the underlying reason for that and have it go away. All right. I always hesitate to put this slide up here, but I think it's a good explanation of the complexity that we have to be aware of so that we can get to the simplicity of actually correcting some of these issues. This is a medical doctor named Paul Hardy came up with this system called the autism quadrangle of system involvement. Now that's a very researcher-y type name, isn't it? And that's exactly what he is. He's a researcher. But we can talk about the gut-brain quadrangle as well and think about mental health as a whole body disorder. as was talked about moments ago. So the 4 systems involved are the nervous system, which I put at the top because it's the information system, remember? The immune system, the detoxification system, and the GI system. There's also genetics involved. I'll talk about genetics in a bit too, but genetics, it turns out, with mental health disorders are assumed at this point to be about a 5% thing. 5% of the issue is a genetic thing. So it's a 9, it is low.
A lot higher than that.
Yep. And that tends to be the case throughout human health, by the way, is that more and more we are finding that less and less it's a genetic issue. And that makes sense because most of the conditions that we're dealing with, the chronic conditions and the mental health conditions that we're dealing with now in such huge prevalence, didn't happen 200 years ago. Like they just weren't really there. So has our genetics changed that much in 200 years? No, it's not like biologically plausible that that would happen. So it's more like, oh, what are all the other factors that are going into it then? But 5% is still, people can be predisposed to that. And then when they add upon that the environmental toxicities and deficiencies that we encounter, then it amps everything up.
So I have a question then.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not trying to argue nothing, but I do wonder, do you think that it's because back in the day, people were more secluded with any kind of disability, mental illness, any of that, as opposed to now there's so much more integration to where it's so much more noticeable than it was back in the day?
Yeah. So the best that I've been able to find is that the actual prevalence is increasing significantly. Yeah, I know the question that you're asking is it just more noticeable now? Is it more out in the community now than it was 200 years ago? And
even 50.
Really, yeah, right. I mean,
really, like you said, the last 10, 20 tops.
Right.
Really, it's been more talked about, more learning, more helping.
Right.
We're starting to get there, but
I would argue, depending on where you are in the world, it still isn't. Like, I lived in the UK for 2 years, taught there for 2 years. Like, they still have things where one of my colleagues had a son who was like so autistic, they had to send him away to live in a group home because that country and their healthcare system and the way it is set up is not set up for like someone like that to live at home.
I would agree with
Yep.
that. My daughter lives
know.
in Italy, and she's expressed the same thing when I've gone to visit.
So
That's why I
yeah,
wonder if
it's a great
maybe-
question because yes, certainly our cultural like integration of people with mental health disorders on anywhere on that spectrum is way different now than it was even 50 years ago. I mean, certainly if we think about like post World War II or before that even, it's very, very different, but the researchers are definitely putting up the flag saying this stuff is increasing in prevalence significantly.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, my thought too is, so I work in the school system as well.
Yeah.
And I started in 2005 as a paraeducator, and the behaviors and mental health stuff that we have to deal with nowadays is nothing like it was even in 2005.
Yep.
So, but also we started integrating a little before, I'm not exactly sure when, but we were definitely included in that in the school system. So I just feel like, I don't know.
Yep.
Where do they get the information for the 5%? Is it from, do teachers get included in that kind of study, or is it just like everybody here would?
I mean, I think the genetics being 5% comes from the medical research literature. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, for sure. So as we think about this quadrangle, we've got those systems, and then we've got environmental stressors. So there is genetics, like I said, about 5% they're saying. Then there's oxidative stress, which I won't get into that too much because environmental stressors add to that. Oxidative stress typically happens inside the body, and it's why everybody says, oh, you must eat a lot of vegetables and stuff like that, because there's antioxidants. It's protecting against the oxidative stress. And oxidative stress has a big negative impact on our nervous system. It has a big negative impact on everything, but it certainly causes the nervous system to dysfunction. So anyway, then we have environmental stressors and physical, chemical, and emotional components. We've got nutrition problems, which I list as both toxicities and deficiencies. So it's not just undernourished, it's malnourished, it's poorly nourished people. Those things lead to inflammation, and then all of that works through this individual, the quadrangle there is an individual, to lead to different disease presentations and symptoms. So again, if what we do is we try to circle that symptom and get rid of it, and we forget about all that other stuff that's happening, it's not going to have a good outcome in the end. Perhaps, and it might be very needed and welcome for the symptom to go away. Let's just put that right out on the table. Sometimes we need to have symptom management when things are severe. But if we also
around from specialist to specialist to specialist until they find the one that decreases your symptom the most.
Right. And that's why really what they're doing is only looking at that. They're not taking the rest of this into account. Thanks, guys. They're not taking the rest of this into account, and it's not going to ultimately heal the organism then, that's what we're looking for, is to actually have healthier people. There's a trifecta.
Back to the question about heredity. Okay, my mother suffered from depression. There's 4 of us girls and 1 brother. We all suffer. I have 4 children. 3 of them suffer.
Yep.
So it's just like heredity to me to a degree, because, okay, how can it be that large of a pattern keep repeating itself unless part of it isn't hereditary?
Sure. There's 2 things I'll say to that,
Yeah.
which first off, 5% of it is heredity.
Okay.
So there are those situations where it is, right?
Yeah.
The second thing that I'll say to it is families grow up in the same environment. And so families are exposed.
Yeah.
If I go back to that quadrangle, families being exposed to all of the same things then become, as a family, more susceptible to the same outcomes.
Yeah.
So,
And we pass it on to our children.
right. The other thing that I'll say about this, because I don't want us to get hung up on the genetics thing,
No.
right? Let's say it's 50%, just as this group here, because the reality is 5% still a guess by the medical researchers, right? But let's say if it was 50%, do you have a control over that 50%?
No.
Nope. So should you worry about it? Nope, because my thing with the kids I coach and the professionals I coach is control your controllables. Like, control what you can control. And there's a lot we can control, and that's what we get to talk about today. So there is a person who is predisposed to a mental health issue, whether that's genetic or environmentally or both, which is almost always what it is. We all are exposed to a toxic deficient environment. Let's just say that right now. That leads to microbiome depletion that's caused by multiple triggers. I'll get back to this. C-section, antibiotics, drugs, poor diet, hypersympathetic response. Let me start at the bottom. A hypersympathetic response. So I'll have a slide where I break down the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. But just know that the autonomic nervous system that you have, so that's the part that runs your internal organs, your blood vessels, your glands, all the stuff we don't ever have to think about, it's got 2 halves, a gas and a brake. And in order to drive around safely, those things have to be balanced, right? And the gas is the sympathetic side. That's the fight, flight, freeze thing, which, by the way, freeze that hasn't been added until modern. Like, fight and flight is really what it's about. What's that?
Last few years it's been added in.
Yep, last few years. Because again, it's a new response. Like, if the mountain lion was coming after you and you froze, whoops, that didn't work out. So it was fight or flight. Now in our modern world, because we don't know how to respond to those sorts of stresses that are perceived as mortal threats to us, freeze happens now as well. Anyway, so a hypersympathetic response is when we're stuck on the gas. And that happens regularly. Poor diet is certainly a trigger. This is not a nutrition seminar. We do nutrition seminars. We have good expertise in that. But I think we all can acknowledge that our Americanized diet is toxic and deficient. Period. People always ask me, well, what should I eat then? I'm like, well-raised meat and vegetables. Like, that's it. That's all humans ever needed before. If it has a barcode, beware. Okay, that's my entire nutrition talk tonight. If it has a barcode, beware. What should I eat? Well-raised meat and vegetables. There you go. That'll get you a long way down the road. The pharmaceuticals that we take, which by the way, Americans take 75% of the prescription drugs manufactured in the world.
Wow,
we are less than 5% of the world's population. Okay, they are inherently toxic. It's why they're designed. They get in and they do things that interrupt our biological pathways. That's toxicity. Antibiotics are a specific component of those because they are killers of bacteria, and they are amazing at that job. In fact, you know, in World War I, when they were basically being invented and all of that, they saved thousands of lives because of war wounds that would have otherwise ended in death, certainly for people. So they're a fantastic invention. However, when they're used inappropriately or overused, in fact, any time that they're used, they do get in there and kill bacteria. 99+% of the bacteria in us, which is a lot. You have far more bacterial cells in you than you have human cells, by the way. They get in there, they kill bacteria, and the vast majority of those, 99+%, are there working for us. So we use antibiotics and we go wipe those good guys out. So that's a problem. That's a problem in particular, especially in the gut. And there's this large connection between the gut and our psychology. We'll get there in a second. And then C-section. People might say, well, what does a C-section do for messing up the gut flora? We're not talking about mom. We're talking about baby. So the first ingestion of phenomenal flora, good bacteria, comes through the vaginal canal as baby goes through there. When baby doesn't have the opportunity to do that, then it doesn't get that good hit of initial bacteria, and they start off at a deficiency with things. Now, of course, mom, if she's going through that surgery, also got treated with antibiotics, and we have to look at both sides of that equation as we go. So those things happen, that causes leaky gut. Leaky gut is, you know, ideally your gut has these really tight junctions. It's actually the physiologic term for them, tight junctions, that as food is going through your gut, it isn't supposed to get through that gut until it's ready, until it's well digested and ready to move through that gut lining. Well, when we disrupt the gut bacteria in there, the flora in there, and we put other toxins in there, and we have other stresses, that those tight junctions become less and less tight, and all of a sudden big things are getting through and into your bloodstream and triggering your immune system to go, whoa, hold on, this stuff's not supposed to be here. And it's a very brilliant response. Our immune system is amazing. But when stuff is getting in there that's not supposed to be in there, it sends up all the red flags of your immune system, and that can create problems. That causes autoimmune reactions, immune hypersensitivities, allergies, brain inflammation, multiple pathogens. This is why when children under the age of 1 are treated with antibiotics, they have something like a 6 to 9 times the rate of allergies and asthma as they age. Okay? It's a problem. This isn't an ear infection talk by any means, but that's typically why they get the first round of antibiotics, is what is called ear infections. Almost always that can be cared for in other ways. So let all of your parents know that that's the case. When we have all of that, it's what is actually considered then leaky brain. There's actually brain barrier issues where things are getting into the brain and out of the brain that ought to be staying where they're supposed to be. And that's where we end up with the body-brain connection to mental health disorders. Which brings the question then, is depression an inflammatory disorder? So this guy from the University of Madison, by the way, University of Wisconsin-Madison, concluded with his research that depression is likely an inflammatory condition. Stress, inflammation, and depression. These researchers point out that our stress response is an appropriate thing. There's a whole bunch that gets said up here, but it's important to read the quote. This highly conserved biological response. Which response? This is the response of if you're on a hike and a mountain lion jumps out at you, your body goes into this entire neurohormonal thing that's going to allow you to get away from that, to fight it, or you're done. Like those are your options. That's the stress response. So that is something that is deep within our code to have that in there, in our physiology. So that highly conserved response to adversity is critical for survival during times of actual physical threat or injury. However, this response can also be activated by modern day social, symbolic, or imagined threats, leading to an increasingly pro-inflammatory expression of health, that's what phenotype is, that may be a key phenomenon driving depression. So, the actual threats that might be out there, we have a response that we're designed to have for that. When we experienced those historically, we either survived and the threat was gone, or we didn't and we were gone, right? So in the situation where we survived, then the threat was gone and the response went back to baseline. Thank you for the reminder that I need to...
I think it's for me drinking the hot tea, but
Okay, no problem.
it's okay.
Our AC turns off at 6. I just remembered that too. So we'll get that. Anyway, so the threat, if it goes away, then our physiology returns to baseline, right? But in the modern world, do the threats ever really go away? No. And in fact, just so you know, all of the marketers know that they need to put those threats in front of you, in front of you, in front of you, in front of you, so that you're motivated to take action on the things and maybe buy their products or go experience the thing or like whatever. The stress response is cultivated by our society, not dissuaded.
Jerks.
I know. They know exactly how to get us. And we now all have the entire world in our pocket, right? Including our children, most of the time. My son's 13, really mad at us still for not letting him just have a full-fledged smartphone. I'm like, dude, you have no idea.
Right.
Like, I don't even want my smartphone. like, I know how dangerous those things are, and I'm a completely capable adult. And I still have to, I have all of the things set on mine. I am on Do Not Disturb all the time. I basically just go clear, I don't want to know. I don't want to know everything that they think I need to know, right? Because it sets up that stress response consistently. So now we get to have a bit of a discussion. And I'm not going to let you guys get too deep into this because you would tell me all the right answers. So thank you. I just, thank you you would tell me all the right answers, but I don't need to go through that because you would absolutely be able to tell me where does health come from? Or where does poor health come from? Well, it comes from how you eat, right? It comes from how you exercise. It comes from how you sleep. It comes from what you focus on. It comes from how you breathe. You would come up with all of these correct things. And those are our 5 fundamentals of health that we talk about, by the way. Sleep, move, eat, breathe, and focus. And that goes both directions, right? If they're going well, that's where health comes from. If they're not going well, that's where health gets eroded. So I like simple models. That's the simple model I came up with to help coach people towards better health.
But we need to think about that in terms of our discussion today. And this is brain development over the course of gestation. So at 25 days, we've got this little brain starting to form, and this brainstem back here and spinal cord, it's all starting to form. And you can see as we progress through that 9 months how much development happens there. It's incredible. In adults, our brains use 25% of our energy. 20 to 25% of our energy. They are, roughly 5% of our body weight. So very expensive organ because it is running the show. It's running the show, but I don't want to give it too much credit because it's running the show based on the information that's coming from the body. So let's give both sides of the equation the credit. It's just the processing center up there. But if all of that happens in 9 months, we got to give some credit to what happens then in the next couple of years too. The next 2, 3, 4 years, because you guys have seen it. Any parents in the house? A few. Anybody seen kids develop language? It's awesome, isn't it? It's like, whoa, I didn't even want to leave my son when he was like starting to speak from like 18 to 20 months. It was like every moment was like, what's he going to say next? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Like you just see them cranking through all this learning. It's amazing. And that really doesn't stop. It's just super obvious at some points. So pretty cool stuff. We talk about health as coming from the Thrive formula. We talk about it in light of the Thrive formula. This is a formula that I developed over the first, say, 5-6 years of my practice, where I realized that health wasn't nearly as complex as what's all the physiology and all the everything. Like we learn all of that in chiropractic school, and I geeked out on it. I loved it. But I realized like, okay, you don't actually have to know all of those things to be able to be healthy. And that's good news. You actually only need to know 4 things if what you want is to thrive. And the first is the fact that we live our lives in physical, biochemical, and emotional realms. Okay? Those are kind of the 3 main areas of stress. Stress is something that always is thought of as negative, but stress is anything that causes change. Okay? So we need stress. Sometimes people say, well, when will I just not have any stress? And I'm like, well, when you reach room temperature. that's when, or less, yeah, true. So while we're alive, we have stress. And it comes in physical ways, biochemical ways, and emotional ways. So the things we do with our body, the things we eat, drink, and get exposed to, and then all the things that happen in our emotional lives. And all of those things are passed through the filter of the nervous system. The nervous system is the thing that allows us to process those. So the first part of the Thrive formula is that we need a healthy, functioning nervous system. This is what we do here. Like this is what we help people with in our chiropractic office here at Bright Futures Chiropractic, is we help monitor nervous system health, we help correct interference to nervous systems, and we help people with the next column on the Thrive formula, which is lifestyle. We need to give our body everything it needs. And we need to limit or eliminate all the things that it doesn't need. And while that's very simple to say, you might be saying, well, that's really general, Dr. Grier. Oh, just have to give their body everything it needs, like piece of cake, right? Like everybody should know that. I realize there's a lot of complexity there. That's why I made the 5 fundamentals. Sleep, move, eat, breathe, focus. Those are our components. I would say with mental health, all 5 of those things need to be evaluated. How are you sleeping? How are you moving? How are you eating? How are you breathing? What are you focusing on? All of those things. If those 5 things are not being addressed in some way, it doesn't have to be all by one professional, but those things need to be being addressed if we want to really get to the root of it. So we have a healthy functioning nervous system, and then we add a lifestyle that gives our body everything it needs and limits or eliminates all the things it doesn't need. The only thing we need to do then is apply time.
sorry.
I know. Yeah, please.
He multiplied.
yeah.
Their life. Reason I asked about ADHD.
That's all right. That's all right. Oh, believe me, there's a reason I'm not a marathon runner. It doesn't fit my attention span. No, and I realize that my operations aren't exactly, this is like for demonstration purposes, okay? I taught biology and math at high school level, and I know this doesn't exactly check out, but it gets the idea. We need to add a healthy nervous system to a healthy lifestyle, and then multiply that over years and years and years and years and years. And that's how we get to thriving. That's the model. Now, if we were to apply this formula to mental health and ask, why is there so many mental health problems in Western culture? We could easily say, well, we are giving the body everything it doesn't need. We are deficient and toxic in sleeping, moving, eating, breathing, and focusing. And nobody pays heedance, I shouldn't say nobody, but on a percentage basis, very, very few people take care of their nervous system or even have that as an awareness. Right? If you were to ask the person in the general public, hey, how do you take care of your nervous system? They'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, my nervous system, that's my brain, right? Like, we just have a very surface level knowledge of what even the nervous system is or does. And so we'll get into that a bit more today. So again, if we're asking why does Western culture produce such an increasing prevalence of mental health disorders, it's because the Thrive formula is turned on its side and kicked out the door. It's all wrong with how we do it. But the good news about that is individuals can change that. Each person can change that. And all processes require time. That's chiropractic principle number 6, by the way, which was actually stated as there's no process that does not require time, and I didn't know why they said it that way. So I just say all processes require time, and it's not a quick fix, especially when we've put a ton of years, a ton of time into doing all that wrong. We have to give ourselves a lot of grace as far as the time it's going to take to recover that. Good news is lots of times we can have some real significant wins inside of 3-4 months, some major wins within a year, and lots of times people have been dealing with these things.
Bless you.
Bless you. Lots of times people have been dealing with these things for decades. So it's worth the squeeze, so to speak. All right. I'm already approaching an hour, so I'm just going to cruise through some of this stuff. That's a fact that this number keeps increasing as research improves, but the brain is processing 11 trillion bits of information per second.
That's why I think I'm ADHD.
Yeah, exactly. They actually say that what you're able to be conscious of is only 40 of those bits. And I'm like, 40 things a second? Could I possibly be conscious of 40 things per second? I don't think so. I hope not. But imagine what all is going on behind the scenes is the point there. The nervous system is sending trillions of bits of information to the brain at all times. So that's a system that we need firing on all cylinders. And when it's not, problems happen. This is the back of the skull. These are the back of the cervical vertebrae. So right like this. That red bit is the vertebral artery. The part in the middle there, that's the spinal cord. Here's a graphic that breaks a person down into only a head and brain and a leg and a spinal cord. But the idea is like, okay, what happens when you're off at a physical and they hit the old reflex thing? Well, that sends information up to the spinal cord, directly back, by the way, reflexes like that, deep tendon reflexes, don't go to the brain first. They go back to the muscle, causing it to contract. That goes out. But there is also, thanks for the information there, go that way, and some of it goes up to the brain. In general, this is how sensation happens, is the body sends information through the spinal nerves, through the peripheral nerves, to the spinal nerves, to the spinal cord, and up to the brain, and then back again. Lots of times it's only focused on what is the brain sending to the body, And far more important is what is the body sending to the brain. I mentioned the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. Again, in the light of time, I'm not going to spend too much time with this, but basically, parasympathetic is all about resting, healing, digesting, repairing. We need to be in a parasympathetic state most of the time to be vibrantly healthy. The sympathetic side of things is all about fight, flight, freeze. And we need to have that response available to us. But when we live in that, we can't be in parasympathetic at the same time. Those two things don't exist at the same time. So you can't be in growth and repair and fight and flight at the same time. And when we spend most of our existence in some low level of fight or flight, that sets us up to being prone for breakdown later. It shows up as all the entire gamut of health challenges, including mental health challenges and chronic diseases. There we go. Okay, so, oh man, okay, I gotta get going. Anyway, I want to tell you about Larry, the raging football fan. And I don't mean raging football fan like he's just a really big football fan. That would be a raving football fan. Larry was the raging football fan. And he actually came to me with one of his primary concerns being, I don't want to yell at the TV all weekend. He knew it was an unhealthy response. He's like, these are teams I don't even care about, but I'm yelling at the TV. I'm angry, I'm yelling. And I was like, again, like, wow, cool, he's coming to me to see how his nervous system is functioning. We did our entire assessment with him, which includes some of the technology I'll preview on some slides here in a bit. We did all of that with him. We identified where there was interference to his communication system, to his nervous system, and we started him with a care plan. And lo and behold, last year, the year before, he has not been yelling at his screen. I don't know how he did in the Hawkeye game on Saturday. I haven't checked with him yet. He'll be controlled. Yeah, it might have been reasonable response. But he'll be in, I think, tomorrow. So I'm going to ask him, like, hey, how'd you do with that?
Hopefully not also a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah, I didn't even hear about the Notre Dame game. I am not a football fan, so it's all right. I'll check it out, though. It sounds like it could be interesting. Anyway, that's an example of, you know what, Larry wasn't diagnosed. Larry was not diagnosed with some mental health disorder, right? Larry wasn't the one coming in saying, I've got anxiety, I've got depression, I've got OCD, I've got PTSD. It wasn't, he doesn't coming in with those things. He was coming in, yeah, but it wasn't a diagnosis. He knew that he could have a more measured, more metered psychological response to things. And the good news was, after his initial care plan, like, it was all sorted out. Like, his body was working better. This is a measure of autonomic health. So this graph, really the simplicity of it is, when you get this test done, you want your dot to be up in that target zone. This is measuring heart rate variability and autonomic balance, the balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. We do this test right behind that wall back there. Raven helps people do this all the time. And we get a graph printout that looks like this that I don't really show people, but that gets translated onto that. And the farther away that dot is from the target zone, the more challenges people have with their autonomic nervous system.
What's the worst one you've seen?
Oh, I mean, so we score these on a 100-point scale, and I've seen some 40s, some people down in the 40s. Not uncommon at all that, we'll see people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's hard to pull it out of that without significant change in the Thrive formula.
So which do you show the patient?
Actually, we print both of them for them, but this is the one I focus on because it's the one that gives people like a tangible idea of like, okay, my dot's there, I need to move it here. I can't do that with this one. This one mostly we use to make sure we got a good capture of their information. So we do that. I'm going to crank through some studies here. In psychosomatic medicine, they said patients suffering from major depressive disorder show profound autonomic dysfunction. In applications in l'encephala, which means the brain, it's a French manuscript. They showed that studies indicate that patients with depression and anxiety disorders exhibit abnormally low heart rate variability compared with non-psychiatric controls. In a general study, the PLUS review there, the conclusion was unmedicated, physically healthy, major depressive disorder patients with and without comorbid anxiety had reduced HRV. So people that weren't medicated, that were diagnosed with depression, whether or not they had anxiety issues with that, had low heart rate variability.
Does that mean that their heart rate stays fairly high all the time? Or does
Nope.
That mean...
So that's a very common question. Like, what are we talking about with heart rate variability? The way that I'll say it is super simple. A metronome has no variability, regardless of whether you set it at 120 beats per minute or 40 beats per minute. It's a machine that has no variability. It's going to tick tock.
Unless it's a really bad...
Unless it's right. I mean, you hope it's a good metronome. So in theory, it's gonna have no variability to it. The human heart, whether it's at 40 or whether it's at 120, ought to have variability in when it ticks and talks. So it's that, they call it interbeat intervals. They actually, it's actually a fairly easy thing to measure. The computers then crunch all the number. They just see when the beats happen and how far apart they happen and do it over some time.
I know you're short on time, so just, have you heard of Visible?
I have not.
Okay. In terms of what they're talking about right now, I would look into it if I were you.
Okay.
I'm not wearing mine today. I wear a heart rate monitor.
Oh.
And it's all about keeping track of your heart rate and heart rate variability and things, and then basically you're able to go in and say, oh, during this time and this time, my heart rate was super elevated. What was I doing during that time?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of identify, it's about how to budget your energy
Yeah.
to get things done. So
Cool.
it's really cool.
Will you write that down for me, Raven? Already did. She already did. She got it. She's that good. They're
Visible.
so wearables, right? This is kind of a new era of wearables. This ring that I wear, this one, not this one, but I have the Aura ring, and it will also. I love it. Yeah, I've
been looking into
5 years. I've been wearing it since 2019. Yep, and one of the things it gives me is heart rate variability. The other thing it gives me is a chart of my entire day and when I was in stress zone, when I wasn't in stress zone, and when I was in restorative zone. So.
I'd be really interested to see that combined with a continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be really, really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, the two patients I have with the continuous glucose monitors, I don't think either one of them actually have one, but that would be really interesting to see what happens to heart rate variability, or even the other things, respiration rate, all that this thing measures. It's crazy what all this measures, how that's affected by glucose handling. Yeah, for sure. Okay, and so psychosomatics, patients had significantly lower mean values for heart rate variability measures relative to the healthy comparison subjects, and that's in heart rate variability in patients with major depression. You get it. It's a valid measure. It's a well-researched measure. And here we get into how are children impacted by the stuff that they have? Early life adverse events plus failure to adapt equals an altered trajectory. Early life stress can, in the book, Healing Developmental Trauma, it says, early life stress can prime people for later depression by altering nerve circuits that control emotion, exaggerate responses to stress, and create the neurochemical and behavioral changes of depression, anxiety, and addictions. Yikes. So they call them ages for ages. I'm forgetting the acronym at the moment. But when kids experience significant, major traumatic things, it affects them later on. Importantly, if they don't adapt to it, right? So the good news is
how they adapt.
Yeah, you mean how they're able to adapt, or how they're guided to
Also,
adapt?
without going into a lot of detail, how we each adapted to what went on in that household
Mm-hmm.
is different.
Sure.
And you would think 5 siblings and how each of us learned to survive as well as adapt.
Yep.
It's
It,
amazing.
it can be all different, for
It is.
sure.
Like
Yep.
he said, you all ended up with depression, but maybe some of you deal with it by like being like super, super like controlling, and other people might deal with it with like alcohol and drugs, and other people
Well,
might
yeah.
deal with it, you know,
like
like
other
Yeah.
alcoholism.
Yep. Yep. So one of the things that's important, you know, educators, people in school districts in the room, is identifying those things early and then helping kids get the right help, which to me, the right help is the Thrive Formula approach, right? Get that nervous system back online. Let's work on that lifestyle. And of course, the threat needs to not be there anymore, or we need to have support for, unfortunately, the kids who are dealing in those situations. Neuroplasticity is a term that's been thrown out quite a bit lately. It used to be thought that, you know, once your brain was developed, that's all you got. It was done. There's no going back. Now we know that that is not the case. It can rewire readily. Great book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge, who's an MD. I actually got this book, read this book, forgot I read it, was watching some, you know, like, was neuroplastic, right? Like, oh, that neuron got replaced by something. I was watching another webinar where they were talking about it, and I was like, I ordered another copy of it, and then it gets, and my wife like has everything in our lives categorized and cataloged, and she's like, we already have that book. I'm like, oh, good, now we have 2 copies of that book. We can have one at the clinic and one at home. Anyway, good stuff. So check that out if you're interested in neuroplasticity and all the brain can do. There's a lot of hope with what the brain can do. So it's never like a done, I shouldn't say never, it's very rarely a done deal. We can do better. So now where do we go? Step 3, like what's next? Well, it takes a village. We understand that there are ingredients to healthy living and the expression of health. And we've got a formula for that. That's like the recipe. And the brain is actually, or the nervous system as a whole is like the chef that puts all that stuff together, you know? You can't just have the ingredients without a recipe or a chef and expect to have a meal out of that. We have to put it all together. And from a health professional's side of things, it takes a village. I am not people's psychologist. I'm not trained for that. There are really, really good people who do that. That's not me. I'm the nervous system end of things for people and the lifestyle side of it. I've done all the work to be a certified chiropractic wellness practitioner. I know about sleeping, moving, eating, breathing, focusing, but I don't know the other things that are necessary. So that's where it takes a village. We need to have good professionals involved, and we've got a good set of resources that we refer people to here. So where's the disconnect? From a nervous system standpoint, we need to look at at what's called subluxation, vertebral subluxation. Has anyone heard the term subluxation?
I've had it.
Okay. Yes. Okay, good. So some people have heard it, some people haven't. It's not a common word in our cultural vernacular. So what a subluxation is when there is a misalignment of the spinal column, which negatively affects neurophysiologic function. So another way of saying that, you've got spinal bones that are out of a line or not moving appropriately, and they cause interference to the nervous system. Those are caused by stresses in life, physical, chemical, emotional stresses. And because of that, nearly everybody is subluxated. And because people are subluxated, that means their nervous systems are working at less than optimum, and therefore their physiology is also performing at less than optimum because the nervous system runs everything. That's the whole reason to see a chiropractor. It's not because of headaches or back pain or neck pain. We do great with that, you know, like helping people with those things. But it's because when you're subluxated, your nervous system isn't working as well as it could, and therefore you are not as healthy as you could be. Eventually down the line, that might become symptomatic, but the reality is if we can help individuals, including kids, have that nervous system working as well as possible within the stresses that they're going through day to day to day,
then we can have a tremendous impact on overall health. That's why a lot of, first off, we see people for years and years and years here. People go like, oh, that's what the chiropractors want. They just want people coming back. It's like, you can do...
Live your life and things happen.
Right.
Live your life.
Exactly. You absolutely are living in a stressful environment. We call it an unnaturally stressful environment. There's nothing natural about the world that we're living in. Nearly nothing. And when we live in an unnaturally stressful world, we are prone to subluxation. We can increase our resilience to those stresses. That's what we help with through the Thrive formula. But the reality is subluxation happens. And therefore, people utilize chiropractic care in our office oftentimes once they've dealt with the initial issue that they're coming in with. They use chiropractic in a way that helps them stay healthy. And that's the exciting part. We love our days here because we have people coming in. I've been here for 17 years. Tomorrow I will see somebody who's been here for over 17 years. It's pretty cool. James will be in the morning. So it's great. Structure absolutely affects function. The structure of our vertebrae impact how our nervous system is working, and that creates both a neurologic and a physiologic impact on our bodies. It causes autonomic imbalance, decreased blood flow to the brain, increased inflammation, cerebral spinal fluid alterations, and mechanical spinal cord tension, like I talked about earlier. I could go through a lot of studies, but I am not going to do that for you because all of these studies that I have referenced here are saying the same thing. The subluxation causes autonomic imbalance. And yes, sometimes it causes motor problems too, how we can move our muscles, and sometimes it causes actual sensory issues like pain, but not always.
Right now. I know I have one right now because I have acid reflux right now. And
Sure.
Acid reflux when a very specific spot in my back has a subluxation.
There you go. Yep. It's probably somewhere between T4 and T6, right in there, because those nerves go around and they serve
Generally 5.
Yeah, they go around and they serve the...
I've been very lucky to have very good chiropractors.
That's great. Okay, so take a deep breath. Can you take a deep breath? Did you feel like, oh, that was rejuvenating? That was good? Because a lot of people can't get there because we're so amped all day long. We're amped. And we spend very little time getting into that parasympathetic state. Yes. You are very compliant. Sorry. Yes, the full in and out would have been just fine. But good work. Way to work on a breath hold. When we have autonomic imbalance, it affects lots of different things in our life. One of the ways that we can measure autonomic imbalance is with a scan we call our thermal scan. That's what it looks like. This is a research done by Christopher Kent, who's actually one of my mentors from way back when I was getting started in chiropractic. And the research has shown, and therefore tools developed, that autonomic dystonia, in other words, dysfunction with the autonomic nervous system, can be evaluated by measuring skin temperature differences.
This is the one that you run down the spine, right, with the little 2 little prongs?
Yep, exactly. So we run it up the spine, and we're measuring the temperature of the skin on both sides simultaneously. Tells us if things are balanced or not. If they are, good. If they aren't, that's where we know that there's issue with that. Pretty cool stuff. Again, we could go on and on with research, but this one was important. Reduction of pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion was observed in cultures from people receiving adjustments. That's what the research term SMT receiving is. People who got adjustments showed reduction in pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion. In COVID, do you remember what they were saying was killing people?
It wasn't COVID, it was everything you caught. Because COVID weakened your immune system.
It weakens your immune system. Your body creates what's called a cytokine storm. Do you remember that term being tossed out there? Oh, the cytokine storm is what's throwing people completely off kilter with things, and that cascades away. That's the cytokines they're talking about. These pro-inflammatory cytokines would create inflammation on inflammation on inflammation, and it'd be a bad deal. It was a bad deal for a lot of people who weren't ready for it. So
adjustments have been shown to decrease that. Cerebral spinal fluid and blood flow compromise when we're subluxated right up at that area of the brainstem. The results of this study suggest that chiropractic spinal adjustments, I don't like the term manipulation, affects regional cerebral glucose metabolism related to sympathetic relaxation and pain reduction. So the areas of the brain that metabolize the ability for the sympathetic nervous system to relax and take it easy improve when we get chiropractic adjustments. Pretty cool. And beyond a doubt, adjusting subluxated spine changes brain function. Heidi Havik, my favorite researcher in the profession at the moment, she's down at the college in New Zealand. She says that we know that spinal function does affect brain function. There's now solid evidence that adjusting the spine changes brain function. Changes that we see in the brain when we adjust the spine occur in the prefrontal cortex. This is pretty important for anyone who has children in school or influence over children in school. They need some prefrontal cortex help quite a bit. Executive function, emotional stability, all of those things. All right, so what causes that? Stress. Stress causes that. Again, it's physical, chemical, and psychological stress that cause subluxation. How common is it? Well, when we look at infants, this is from 1987, some of the original research that was done on kids. 1,000 infants were checked in the first month of life. 80% were found to have subluxation in their upper neck. 1,250 infants were evaluated in the first 5 days of life. It was found that 90% had suffered birth trauma and strain through the neck and cranial areas. 10% severe trauma. Most of it goes undiagnosed. The birth process, even under optimal controlled conditions, is potentially a traumatic, crippling event for the fetus. Spinal cord and brainstem injuries occur often during the process of birth, but frequently escape diagnosis. We in the United States are worst in the world at this, by the way. Yep, worst in the industrialized world in infant and maternal mortality.
So is
by the
this
way.
like kind of where the start of some mental health starts? Like if there were a C-section or a birth that had those complications?
Yes, so that's what we can extrapolate to. If a child has been subluxated since birth, then the nervous system hasn't been functioning appropriately since birth. And it's one of those predisposing factors to mental health challenges. That's the hypothesis. There's even a thing called KISS syndrome for it, which, the quote is, these delicate upper cervical structures undergo considerable stress during delivery. These are mostly medical studies. This one was a review of mental health and historical chiropractic stuff, which, if you don't know, chiropractic started right here in Iowa in 1895. We're just about to come up on the 18th on our birthday. The chiropractic birthday is September 18th. And as it says here, for the better part of 4 decades, treatment of the mentally ill was a highly motivated discipline within the chiropractic profession. Documentation both in and out of the profession suggests that standards of care in chiropractic institutions was superior to that expected in state hospitals during the period observed. So pretty interesting stuff. This is the Davenport Chiropractic Sanitarium. This is the Clearview Sanitarium, also in Davenport, run by the Palmer Group. We have the Midwest had others as well. Illinois had some, Wisconsin had some, where they were actually having sanitariums that got really, really good results.
Not to bag on the chiropractic profession, but basically it was like, these people are in a sanitarium and no one really cares what happens to them, so go mess with them.
Which happened on not only chiropractic side, but the medical side too. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it was important in that previous book there that our standard of care was found to be significantly higher than the medical stuff. 65% success rate. After intensive investigation, the facts found that in the Jamestown State Insane Asylum in North Dakota, which was under medical supervision during the period of 1922 to 34, they showed a 27% cure and satisfactory discharge. while the Forest Park Chiropractic Sanitarium in Davenport, that one, had a record of 65% cures and satisfactory discharges. So there's good history for it. I kind of wish we were still doing some of that stuff. I just don't have time to go through all these, but we've got research to support all of it. So let's get right down to it. When we have improved physiology through improved neurology, there's a lot of side benefits to that. We see significant improvements in autonomic function, hormonal function, cardiovascular function, immune function, strength, overall athletic ability, heart rate variability, range of motion, respiration. These aren't just things we're saying and hoping. We've got decent research on it, and nobody gives us money to research, I will say. Nobody. Like, we have to scrape and claw for all of the research that we have. The good news is physiologists and neurologists get a fair bit of money for research, and they are actually proving us to be really successful, which is great. Reaction time, neurocognitive function, information processing, visual acuity, stress, reproductive hormones, recovery time, general health of senior citizens, reduced labor times, all sorts of side benefits of things. That's a literature review there. So Dr. Steve Tullius is a friend of mine, and he is actually the one behind this particular workshop. I give him credit for really getting out there, getting the word out to people to come to these workshops, and for the profession as a whole to start speaking up about mental health. This is a patient of his who said, after receiving care, I was ready to die. I had tried everything I could possibly try to get better, but nothing worked. I was having daily mental breakdowns, cutting, and having to fight thoughts of suicide every day, hoping I didn't wake up from sleep. After the first adjustment, I could see colors for what they really were, bright and vibrant instead of dull and melancholy. I walked out of the office wanting to live again for the first time in a very long time. I owe my life to Dr. Steve. So, I like being people's chiropractor. We have a good job, and we have a big job. We educate in ways, and we approach health in ways that are completely different than what people get in typical care elsewhere. We connect people with professionals that they need to be connected with, and we work in here on that Thrive formula to educate about lifestyle and to make sure that nervous system is functioning well, and to coach you to do that over time. That's how we do it. If you know people around here, let them know it's what we do. If you have people that you know need to get to a good chiropractor anywhere, please reach out to me, talk to me. Like I said, I'm a chiropractic coach to people all over the country, and part of a coaching group called the Remarkable Practice that coaches chiropractors around the world. So I've got a big network of people I can reach out to. I'm always happy to connect people with good chiropractors wherever they may be. And if they're within, a 50-mile radius of here, it's a nice drive to get to Kalona, I think. So you guys remember this that I showed? That's Sam's spine. Remember what that spine is supposed to look like? Remember that nice, beautiful curve that's supposed to be there? Well, like I said, Sam had developed relatively rapidly over the course of a couple of months anxiety issues and social disorders, specifically around school. She was always loved school, loved her social group, loved doing the work, was a learner, the whole thing. And all of a sudden, all of that changed. She was nervous about school. She started having issues in her social group. She was very anxious about anything that she had to do around school. They brought her in. This is what the x-ray looked like. Clearly there is misalignment with that neck. When I see that, all I can imagine is the stress that's being put on that brainstem and the spinal cord in here. And when I showed it to her and her parents, they were like, oh my goodness, is this going to cure these issues we've told you about? And I'm like, well, keep in mind, chiropractic doesn't cure anything. What chiropractic does is it helps the body work at its optimal.
It puts your body in a place to get better.
And does an optimally functioning body have these things going on? And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. So we did a 6-month care plan with her, all instrument-based, by the way. There's lots of different ways to go about chiropractic. We do multiple ways here. We do some manual adjusting. We do some instrument adjusting. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's fine. But people think about chiropractic as these big, hands-on, crunchy moves, and sometimes we do that. And sometimes we only use an instrument, and it's super gentle, and it's influencing neurology. First, we did that with Sam. This is what her spine looked like after 6 months of care.
So is all of this like covered under insurance?
So,
Goes on your insurance.
so insurance is an interesting question. So let me get right back to that. After saying, this wouldn't be a good story if Sam's psychological issues stuck around, right? And they didn't. They went away. Sam's now just starting her 3rd year of college in Chicago. She was, of course, from right around here. She's off doing things that young people
In bigger, faster
ought to do.
places?
Yeah, in bigger, faster places, handling the emotional strain of that and doing well. And what motivates me is the question of, what if Sam wouldn't have gotten checked? Then what, right? We all know. We all know the cascade and the stacking of medication that happens. And typically, sometimes people become functional with it, but not optimal with it, typically. So that's why I swing my feet out of bed at 4:50 every morning to get my workout in, so I'm ready to show up here at 7:15 and start caring for people. What if Sam wouldn't have got checked? What if I get to meet the next Sam tomorrow? That's what motivates me. So when we can have results like that, I typically address the insurance question by, insurance is all over the map. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And we like to keep our relationship with the person, right? There are 3 people in that triangle, so to speak, or 3 things. It's the person, us, and the insurance company. We like this relationship. So we help people manage their insurance if they have benefits and they want to use it. But that relationship happens with the patient, the insurance company to the person. We keep our relationship with the person, so we don't feel like we're being controlled by a third party that doesn't really know what we do.
So what you're saying is that we go and we pay cash or whatever, and then we get our money, try to get our money back from the insurance company, is what you're saying?
Typically that's how it works. I will say, and I'm not making assumptions, well, I am making assumptions, but Medicare works all different. So it's a whole different ballgame. But commercial insurance, yes, we are out-of-network providers for that. And Kim, our assistant here, she's our accounts manager. She helps people manage that relationship, but we keep our relationship with the patient. And the reason I chose that, I just think it's worth saying since it's been said. The reason I chose that route is because the insurance company got in my way of caring for people like I knew they needed to be cared for.
Yeah.
And I kicked them out. I was like, I don't want you in my clinic anymore.
Right.
I just got sick of it.
Doctor.
But yeah, they're not the doctor, but they were limiting care and they were telling me I could do things and couldn't do things. They had never seen the person before, and I got upset with it to the point where I remember the conversation with my wife. I said, we are getting out of this relationship, and if it wrecks our practice, I'll go back to teaching because I loved teaching. I'm like, that's fine. I got really big student loans that I'm gonna have to figure out how to pay off, but that's fine. Like if I have to go forward, I'm not doing it with them.
Yeah.
So that was how I approached it, and it's worked great, and we have lots of people that utilize their benefits. The good news is Blue Cross Blue Shield Wellmark, they typically have just as good or better out-of-network benefits than they have in-network.
Right.
So it's a big discussion. Everybody's policy is different, of course, and yeah, yep, for
So
sure.
if I wish to come to see you down through Aetna,
Okay,
then I can go outside of my group or stay within it.
okay.
So who would I get a hold of here at the office to discuss, so I can understand
Kim.
what to ask the insurance company?
Yes. The first answer is anybody but me, because I don't have any idea. Or Dr. Ryan. I have an associate here in the office too. Dr. Ryan also knows nothing about it. Raven doesn't really know anything about it, but she would for sure hand the phone to Kim. Kim's the one. Kim's the one. So just to get to that point. Anyway, yeah. So that brings up the thing. Like sometimes people are like motivated. Oh, gee, I would like to get checked. That entire visit. So we have a full consultation that we do with people. What's gone on in the past? What's going on now? What do you look to do in the future? What are your goals? Then we do a full examination from that, spinal examination, both motion and position analysis. We do 3 different computerized techniques, 2 of which I showed you on there. We do digital x-ray, we do posture screenings, and then I take all that information and I put together a report where I sit down and talk with you about it, or Dr. Ryan sits down with you and talks with you about it. If you were to get that level of service at the hospital, how much would it cost?
Thousands.
Thousands, right? Absolutely. The thermal scan alone is probably a $400 or $500 test if you just go have some intern at the university run that, right? Or a resident at the at the university. We do the entire thing off the street for $350 to $400, depending on what all gets done there. Like, we keep that initial cost to get evaluated super low, and then when people come to these things, I do the whole thing for $47. So for $47.
So we
and
can call and make an appointment, and it would be $47.
yes, and you can even talk to Raven right now, and it'll be
Jeez,
$47.
okay.
The difference is Medicare is different, and Medicare will not allow me to discount fees. So I can't do the initial offer there for Medicare. So that's a different scenario
So
if
if
that
I
happens
just-
to be.
So she could just pay the $47.
I just pay my $47. It
Un-
doesn't work that way, or it does work that way.
It does not work that way. That's the thing.
See, that's what-
Medicare says the actual rule is I can't give away anything worth more than $10 to people who utilize Medicare. So Medicare people, I know it's not my rule, so I'm the messenger on that one.
I know.
But but if people want to utilize their Medicare benefits, we do that. They just pay for the initial evaluation, and then we utilize Medicare benefits after that. So that's how that works.
Oh, confusing.
It is.
We'll come in and talk to Miss Kim.
Okay, sounds good. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for coming. I did take an hour and 37 minutes. I apologize for that, but thank you for being very engaged during it. I'll let you get back to your evenings, and if you are interested in getting that initial evaluation, Raven is absolutely ready with the times that we have in the next couple of weeks. They do fill quickly, so please talk with her.
Oh.